I'm Mary Linney. I'm the chair of the DCF Committee for, 3 more weeks maybe. And we are going to present the DCF Master List for 2014-2015. But before we do, the rest of the committee is going to introduce themselves.
Okay. I'm Julie Pickett. I'm a children's librarian at the Stowe Free Library.
I'm Lauren Chabot. I'm the librarian at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier.
Grace Green at the Department of Libraries.
I'm Caitlin Corliss from the Essex Free Library.
I'm Hannah Peacock from the Burnham Library in Colchester.
Suzanne Loring from Stern Center for Language and Learning.
And Meg Allison, teacher librarian at the Moortown Elementary School.
Don't you think they should move over here?
Here we go.
Hi guys.
Book number 1, same law. Okay, Doll Bones is the first book on the list. Zach, Poppy, and Alice have been friends forever. And for almost as long, they've been playing a continuous, ever-changing game populated with pirates, thieves, mermaids, and warriors. Ruling over them all is the Queen, a bone china doll locked in a cabinet, cursing those who displease her. The 3 friends are in middle school now, and Zach's father is not happy that he is still playing with dolls and playing imaginary games. So one day when Zach is at school, his father throws all his action figures away. Zach is devastated, and instead of telling Poppy and Alice what happened, he avoids them and lies about the reason. In a desperate move to save the game and their friendship, Poppy takes the Queen out of the locked case. That night, the Queen starts to haunt her dreams. The Queen says she's the ghost of a dead girl whose ground-up bones were used to make the doll. She continues to haunt Poppy, telling her that the 3 friends must find the dead girl's grave and bury the doll inside it. If they don't, terrible things will happen to them. So Zach, Alice, and Poppy set off on one last adventure to lay the Queen's ghost to rest. Nothing goes according to plan. Creepy things happen. Is the doll just a doll, or is there something sinister at work? Has Poppy been telling the truth, or is she tricking her friends into playing a new game? Give this to kids who like to read scary stories under the covers with a flashlight. It starts out scarier than it ends up. It's really more of a story about growing up and leaving your childhood behind.
The next book on the list is Flora and Ulysses by the little-known author K.T. Camilla. No one's ever heard of this one. It's a great book, as you probably all know, and it's really good for anyone, any age, younger than 4th grade even. So the book starts off with Flora Bell Buckman sitting in her room reading comic books, which she's not supposed to be doing because she signed a contract with her mom to turn her face away from the idiotic hijinks of comics and toward the bright light of true literature, which is kind of ironic because her mom writes romance novels for a living. All of a sudden she hears a really loud sound in the yard next door, like it sounded like a jet engine. She looks out and there is her neighbor almost vacuuming up a squirrel. By the time she gets out there, the squirrel has in fact been vacuumed up. Holy bagamba, this can't be, thought Flora. Who vacuums their yard? So she rushes out, and she gives mouth to mouth on lips that taste fuzzy, damp, and slightly nutty. But she manages to bring the little creature back to life. So the encounter with the vacuum and his new human friend has left the squirrel feeling very grateful, happy, and in possession of some new super squirrel's powers. This begins the adventure of Flora and Ulysses. So the narration alternates between girl and squirrel, the 2 new friends, along with Tootie Tickman's blind nephew, William Spiver. They set out to deal with a crazy cast of adults who disrupt and enrich their lives. Holy bagamba, indeed. And I just, as an aside, this week I had my book discussion. I have a monthly DCF book discussion, and I had kids, it's for parents and kids, and I had a 1st grader right up to adult, and the 1st grader had very astute, awesome questions and comments, and it's really the one book on the list you can say, well, not the one book, but it's a book on the list you can recommend to anybody. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't feel that way about some other ones I'm about to talk about, but this one you can.
Better Nate Than Ever. Nate is an 8th grader who lives in a small town in Pennsylvania and is totally obsessed with musicals. He and his best friend Libby know every song from every musical, and they communicate in sort of a shorthand having to do with the musicals. So unbeknownst to his parents, he and Libby make this plan for him to go to New York City alone, to the big city, to try out for Elliot in E.T. the musical. So this is the tale of small town boy coming into big city, finding out what trying out is really all about. He meets a bunch of stage mothers and a stage uncle. He sees possibilities. He's been bullied and in his own town. He's been called various names having to do with people thinking he's gay. And he sees for the first time a club that is for gays, and he sees two guys dancing together, and he wonders, is this going to be me? Is this really a possibility? It's about exploring his sexuality. There isn't anything, nothing is acted upon, but it's just about a boy growing up, and some of it is just so unbelievably funny as he explores New York and his dream.
The next book is The Saturday Boy by David Fleming. An Apache helicopter hangs from the ceiling. 91 letters lay hidden in a lunchbox. An 11-year-old boy desperately awaits the arrival home of the helicopter pilot and letter writer, Dad. This book is told by 11-year-old Derek. Derek lives with his mother while his father is in Afghanistan, and his father has been in Afghanistan on and off for most of Derek's life. Derek misses his father, and they write back and forth. 91 letters are exchanged. Derek struggles at school with his peers and often gets into trouble as a result of his inability to deal with his emotions, and he is also frequently taunted by his peers. He also struggles with the fact that one close friend is cruel to him at school, but nice to him in private when no one else is looking. So it's very confusing to him as to why that's happening. He's told to be the bigger person by his mother, who is somewhat blind to the bullying her son receives at school. Derek muddles through and learns that life is sometimes hard and you just have to do your best to navigate through it. It was very well written, the characters are very well developed, and it brought tears to my eyes multiple times while I was reading it. It was a really nice perspective of what a child goes through emotionally when a parent is away at war and some of the difficulties that they face that you may not realize because of it.
Okay, and this is Salt, a story of friendship in a time of war by Helen Frost. Anika, in English, Anika means hello friends, and that's what James and Anika are. They're both 12-year-old boys in 1812 living on the Indiana Territory, but they come from two very different cultures. James's family they are American settlers, and they run the local trading post, and Anika is a member of the Miami tribe, which is a Native American tribe that has lived on the land for generations. They don't speak the same language, but they don't really need to understand what the other one is saying to understand each other. They play outside together, they're great friends. But the innocence of their friendship is challenged when the War of 1812 approaches, and they begin not to trust one another. It's told, Helen Frost uses verse poetry to tell her story. It's told in alternating viewpoints, from James's perspective and Anika's. James, his poetry is in straight lines to resemble the American flag, and Anika's poems take the shape of the ribbon work of the Miami tribe. So it's a historical novel, it's informative, it's told in a really accessible way, and it delicately yet honestly addresses a terrible time in history.
Come in.
So I'm going to just backtrack for a second because I forgot to mention about Better Night Than Ever that there's a sequel that's already out, and it has a title, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. So, all right, now we're on Zebra Forest. This is actually a book that I have thought about a lot since I finished reading it, and you know what it's like when you read a million books. Some of you do, right? You don't remember a lot of them very well, but this really resonated with me. It's about an 11-year-old girl, Annie, who at the beginning of the summer had 3 wishes. She wished to grow tall, she wished to have an adventure, and she wished to meet her father. None of those was very likely, since her family is all short. She lives in a tiny, boring town, and her father is dead. However, her grandmother and she and her brother live in a house which is very close to a prison. And there is a breakout from the prison, and one of the prisoners comes to their house and takes them hostage. And what she learns from this prisoner totally changes everything that she thought she knew about her life and about her family. The title, Zebra Forest, means a few things. It literally means a forest, the forest that's behind their house, that's made up of birch trees and dark trees. So you have the black and white. But there are all these other associations, the idea of the prison bars, the fantasies that she and her brother make up when they're in the forest about what their father was really like, and so on. It's a very moving book, and I would love to have a book discussion with kids about it to see what they think.
All right, the next book on the list is Twerp by Mark Goldblatt. And this is about a group of boys in Queens in the year 1969, although setting is not necessarily well, in some ways, but it could be any kid in any time. So these boys do a pretty terrible thing, and the perspective in the story is told is Julian Twerskis. And he meets hasn't really come to terms with what he did in this incident and what his role is and what his responsibility is for having done this. So his English teacher is pretty awesome, yay, and says, if you write about this incident, I will let you out of certain other assignments. And Julian's all over that because he hates Shakespeare. They know they're going to read Julius Caesar, so he's really excited to do that. So he starts writing, and he finishes 9 composition books before he actually writes about what happened. So then he sort of realizes he has to do it. So he writes about his part in the incident. And I'm not going to tell you what the incident is because they really don't tell you till the end. So once he finally writes about it, this is what he says. The assignment is over, Mr. Selkirk. I'm done with it. I've got nothing more to say about what happened at Ponzini. Nothing's going to change it. I want to get on with my life, but I'm glad you made me keep going because you made me realize what I had to do. And then he does it. As the back cover says, it's a good book about a bad deed. It's a really good story about a kid who has done a bad thing, but is not a bad kid at all.
Okay, I've got Escape from Mr. Limoncellos Library by Chris Gravenstein. This is a story of Kyle Keeley, and Kyle is sort of a classic underachiever. He's also the youngest child in a family of boys. He loves games of all kinds, so when the world's most famous game designer, a guy named Luigi Limoncello, decides to give back to his hometown, Kyle gets sort of the dream of a lifetime. So things start to look up. He designs, Luigi Limoncello designs and builds the most beautiful public library ever. And then he holds a contest. And Kyle and the 11 other winners of the contest get to participate in a lock-in in the library. Lock-in goes well until the next morning when the real contest begins. And in order to get out, they actually have to figure out the way out. They have to escape. And then they win a better prize. Allegiances are formed, friendships are tested, and Melville Dewey is probably dancing in his grave over what's actually in the library. The remaining contestants must solve puzzles, deconstruct anagrams, puzzlegrams, pictograms, rebuses, and use all their code-breaking skills to win. Part Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, part mixed up files with a little Survivor thrown in for good measure. This is a great adventure for all ages. Between the DCF conference and now, I have finally solved the puzzle. There is a puzzle at the end of the book, and this morning I sat there and figured it out, and I won't reveal it, but it's kind of cool.
Congratulations.
And he just won the Agatha Award for the book, because I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Okay. All right, so this is the Mad Potter George Orr Eccentric Genius, and you may have never heard of George Orr before seeing the Mad Potter on the DCF list, but chances are after you read this kind of photo biography, you'll be wishing you could have met the man himself. He was an artist with a grand vision, a larger-than-life personality, and an unwavering dedication to his work. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts, he never gained the recognition he deserved during his lifetime. Orr was a potter who lived in Biloxi, Mississippi in the 19th century, but his vision was far ahead of his time. He began his career creating traditional pottery like teapots and vases, but after working with a group of artists, he was inspired to create completely original art and create no two alike, in his words. So he began forming his pots into these extravagant pieces with large pronounced curves and folded edges and bold glazes. He was a complete eccentric who was as much a showman as a potter. In order to get visitors to his studio in Biloxi, he hung signs around the town claiming to be the greatest potter on earth. He entertained his visitors with exuberant antics, and he was always in search of recognition and notoriety more than monetary success. He stayed true to his artistic vision despite never receiving that recognition. And it wasn't until the 1970s, after he had passed away, that a collector discovered his pottery and bought the entire collection for around $50,000. And eventually, Orr's popularity spread, and his pieces began selling for tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Orr would certainly be happy that he is found success and notoriety after all, but he wouldn't be surprised. He once said, "I'm making pots for art's sake, the future generation, and my own satisfaction. But when I am gone, my work will be prized, honored, and cherished."
Did you go, Grace, to the museum?
I didn't have a
You
chance.
didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I had a conference in Biloxi, and I was so hoping to go to his museum, but they didn't let me out of the hotel. Out of the casino, that's where we were.
Now we know. Has anyone read this book, Sure Signs of Crazy? Okay. There are a few books on the list that deal with heavy subjects. This is one of them, but it's a wonderful book. It's about a 12-year-old girl named Sarah Nelson. While her friends obsess about Harry Potter, she spends her time writing letters to Atticus Finch. She collects trouble words in her diary. Love can be a trouble word, she writes. So can the word crazy. She should know her own mother has been in a mental hospital since Sarah was 2. Since then, Sarah and her father have moved from one small Texas town to another, and not one has felt like home. Everything changes one summer when Sarah becomes determined to get answers about her family's big secret, which is why is her mother in a mental hospital. Along the way, she makes unexpected new friends, has her first real crush, gets closer to her grandmother, and begins to understand her alcoholic father. Sarah reveals the secret right in the first paragraph of the book. And the author wrote an adult novel a few years back called Janeology, which was very successful, Karen Harrington. And Karen Harrington lived in Houston, Texas, where there were several incidents of women drowning their children. And Janeology is the story told from the mother's point of view, and this is the book told from the daughter's point of view.
Okay, and this is 33 minutes until Morgan Sturts kicks my butt. Just 1 year ago, Sam and Morgan were the best of friends, playing Alien Wars video games all day long. But now, Morgan wants to kick Sam's butt. At the beginning of 33 minutes, Sam is sitting in social studies class, and there are 33 minutes until recess and 33 minutes until the butt kicking is supposed to begin. Morgan is 10 inches taller, 40 pounds heavier, and Sam is terrified. But luckily, a series of wild events keeps delaying the butt kicking. But unluckily, the same series of events leads to him getting hit in the head with a bowl, getting a concussion, and going to the principal's office. This is laugh out loud funny. It'd be a great read aloud for parents, teachers, and librarians. Sam is a character to root for, even though he's not perfect. It humorously deals with a sensitive and common issue, the loss of friendship, the end of friendships, how they evolve and change, and what you do when they end.
Okay. The Great Trouble, A Mystery of London, the Blue Death, and a Boy Called Eel by Deborah Hopkinson. A young orphan named Eel must scavenge the Thames River in London in 1854. Life is hard. Eel has secrets to hide, and an evil man named Fish-Eye Bill Tyler is after him. But Eel loves his neighbors, and they have sort of formed a family unit. He believes he can survive until the men, women, and children that he holds dear to him start to die. And they start to die in kind of grotesque ways. Eel pulls in his employer to help, a man named Dr. John Snow, who really did exist. And he's kind of taken aback when Dr. Snow isn't really so concerned with helping the people survive as he is trying to figure out the source of the illness. Why did this happen? With help from his good friend Flory, who's this great female character, Eel tries to solve the mystery of the Blue Death. This is a great medical mystery with engaging characters, a really seedy, colorful setting, and a wonderful hero and heroine that I think kids can actually relate to. It has a high body count. But The Great Trouble shows how an early public health crisis changed history. And Hopkinson, there's in the packet, there's a great curriculum connection to this. I think the publisher created a guide that's really linked to Common Core. Sorry, I'm going to say the Common Core word. Still a good read.
Still a good read, even if you can link it.
Even though it's Common Core.
Okay. The thing about luck. 12-year-old Summer and her family are having a year of terrible luck. Summer gets malaria, her quirky brother Jazz can't make any friends, and then her parents are sent off to Japan to care for elderly relatives right at the start of the wheat harvesting season. Summer's parents are migrant farm workers. The whole family travels from farm to farm across the Midwest, working in the fields as combine operators, and in the kitchen preparing meals. Now Summer and her brother must help her grandparents do the job. Great. Her crotchety grandmother has a bad back, and her grandfather is slowing down and showing signs of exhaustion. Summer helps out in the kitchens, but when a crisis occurs, she knows she has to do more. This is a quiet story in terms of plot, with a lot of detail about wheat harvesting and life as a migrant farm worker. There are lots of little drawings in here, too, that Summer has drawn of all the vehicles and the various parts of the combine. Setting and character development drive the story. The grandmother is a particularly colorful character. She never stops picking on Summer, and yet her love is apparent. Summer's dog also plays an important role in the book, putting Summer in a moral dilemma when he kills the boss's chickens. This book would make a good jumping off point for a discussion about farming, the difference between big food production in the Midwest and Vermont farming. Compare Vermont farms to those in the book. Does Vermont have migrant workers? Do you have farm kids in your class? And this book won the National Book Award.
This book makes me very happy. The Adventures of a South Pole Pig. Like Flora and Ulysses, this is one that you could read to younger children than 4th grade. This is the kind of book I would have absolutely adored when I was a child. Just look at that pig. Doesn't she just make you happy? And amazingly, her name is Flora. I mean, how many lists have we had with 2 Floras on it? So Flora is a pig who is not content to just root around the pigsty. No. Flora is an adventurer. She wants to go places, do things, learn things. Her brothers are perfectly content just to eat and root around and sleep, and she thinks they are just unbelievably boring. And she eventually gets a glimpse of the outside when she sees the farmer, her owner, training his dogs to be sled dogs. Well, she thinks, that is the life for me. So she starts training. She works out every day and trying to build up her stamina so that she can run and she can pull the sled, and she's got this whole new world. And then the farmer and his dogs pack up. They're going on a trip to Antarctica. And yes, Flora gets to go with them. But the reason she gets to go is not the reason that she thinks. And kids will catch that right away. So a lot of the humor there is the disconnect between what's real and what Flora thinks. And of course, she does save the day. And I wouldn't be recommending this for 3rd and 4th graders if it didn't have a happy ending. But very funny.
The next story is, or the next book is The Vine Basket by Josanne LaValle. And this is a really neat book because it takes place in current time, but it really seems like when you're reading the story, it really feels like it's happening 100 or more years ago. The story is about 14-year-old Marigold, a Uyghur girl growing up in East Turkestan, which is in western China. She has dreams of going to school, but is forced to stay home and help out on her family farm. She struggles to stay hopeful in an ever-challenging environment, faced with an angry father, a withdrawn mother, and a society that looks down on women, and a government that would like nothing better than to send her away to work in a factory in southern China. The one bright light that she has in her life, besides her younger sister, is her grandfather, and they build a beautiful relationship together throughout the story. So it's a really lovely piece. It's not until an American woman happens upon Marigold's family's cart at the market and sees a basket woven by Marigold and offers her a goodly sum of money for it, and then asks for more, that things start to change for Marigold. If she can make more baskets and sell them to the American, perhaps she can help her family's farm and realize her own dreams at the same time. While her task at hand may be her greatest challenge yet, Marigold proves that hope and determination go a long way to help realize one's dreams. This is a really wonderful story about facing challenges in your life and global understanding, and it was a really good read. I also have the next story book. This is A Boy on the Wooden Box by Leon Layson. This was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Leon Layson was the youngest boy on Schindler's List. So he was 10 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland, and his family was forced to relocate to the Krakow ghetto. With incredible luck, perseverance, and grit, Layson was able to survive the sadism of the Nazis, including the demonic Amon Goeth, commander of Plaszow, the concentration camp outside Krakow. Ultimately, it was the generosity and cunning of one man, a man named Oskar Schindler, who saved Leon Layson's life and the lives of his mother, his father, and 2 of his 4 siblings. By adding their names to his list of workers in his factory, it was the list that became Schindler's List. This is the only memoir published by a Schindler's List child. It perfectly captures the innocence of a small boy who goes through the unthinkable. The wonderful thing about this book is the lack of anger, the lack of rancor, the lack of sadness. It's very full of hope, and the abundance of dignity in Mr. Layson's telling is better than anything you ever read. It's a very, very hopeful story. It's not overly graphic, but it gets the point across. And the woman who helped Layson write this book, unfortunately, he passed away last January, but the woman who helped him pull this book together is a professor at Chapman University and the director of the Rogers Center for Holocaust Education. And they do a really cool writing contest for 7th through 12th graders every year. So that's definitely something to look into. They do it every year, so you should definitely look into that for your students if they're 7th and up.
Oh, that's me. Hiding out at the Pancake Palace. 11-year-old Elvis Ruby is a superstar with phenomenal talent. He sings like an angel, can play just about any instrument, is full of charm and personality, and has dark curly hair to die for. He was sure to win the Tween Star TV competition, think American Idol for tweens, when he uncharacteristically froze on stage during a live performance. Now the paparazzi are camped outside his hotel room demanding an interview. To get away from all the bad press, Elvis's dad takes him to Wares Grove, a small town in the Pinelands of New Jersey. There, an old friend known as Aunt Emily runs the Piney Pete Pancake Palace with her older daughter, Millicent. Here at the Pancake Palace, Elvis goes into hiding. Millicent cuts and dyes his hair and coaches him in how to not act like himself. He now goes by Aaron, his middle name, and pretends to be a distant relative. Enter Cecilia Reel, a loudmouth 7th grade loner who recognizes him right off. She confronts him and promises not to tell anyone who he is if he will help her. She can't carry a tune or feel a beat for the life of her, and legend has it she was born in the middle of the scrubby pine forest, supposedly while the pine trees were singing. If Elvis helps her find the singing trees, and maybe some hidden musical talent, she promises to keep her mouth shut. But secrets are hard to keep. Will Elvis help her in time? Kids will relate to the Justin Bieber-like character and may gain insights into the price of fame, keeping secrets, and finding your own true self.
All right, the next book is Far, Far Away by Tom McNeil, which I think might be my favorite book on the list. Have any of you read it yet? Did you like it?
I love that.
Oh my gosh. It's the creepiest, so not for your first graders. No, definitely 7th and up. Maybe anyway.
Yeah.
Holla, is it not a great day to be alive? That's for my friend Lisa. Can you hear me? Are you there? Listen if you will. You must wake up and scream and shout, listen if you will. I must share with you the tale of Jeremy Johnson Johnson from the small town of Never Better, USA. Jeremy's a quiet and lonely boy. He keeps to himself. He's seen as somewhat odd by the rest of the townspeople. Allow me to explain further. My name is Jacob Grimm, and I am Jeremy's finder of occasions. I watch over the lad and help to guide him on the right path. The poor boy's mother vanished when he was in 1st grade, and his father has never recovered from her departure. Jeremy's mother instilled in him a love for fairy tales, a passion for which I am grateful. But now, Jeremy's life has taken a sharp turn. He has been invited by the Ginger Boltinghouse for Princess Tarta at Stenblix's Swedish bakery. She is all wrong for him. He has no time for this foolishness. He must study, study, study. As it turns out, Jeremy should have listened to Jacob, as innocent mischief leads the friends to an unexpected and dangerous place. Oh, you poor children, what an ordeal! But do not worry, it will soon all be over. Holla! Is it not a great day to be alive? For Jeremy and Ginger, it is not such a great day after all. It's really the creepiest book.
It's a grim fairy tale.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Grim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Both meanings.
So next is Primates, The Fearless Science of Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, and Birute Galdikas. And this is a graphic novel that introduces these three extraordinary female scientists. These are three fascinating women, and this presentation of their life does a really brilliant job of succinctly communicating snippets of each of these scientists' life's work and the challenges and the sacrifices that went along with it. We learn how each woman got their start in the field, some of the trials they experienced while conducting their field research, and some of the contributions they made to science. It does an amazing job of seamlessly weaving these three stories together, and there was this natural connection as they all got their start thanks to paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey. Although it's very slim, it's about 120 pages, the reader is left with a solid understanding of how each woman pursued her dream and the impact they had on their field. And the graphic novel format makes this topic really interesting and accessible for all readers, and many will be left wanting to learn more about these extraordinary women, and there are some suggestions in the back for further reading.
Okay. The Mouse with a Question Mark Tail by Richard Peck. An undersized mouse with no name lives with his Auntie Marigold in the Royal Mews next to Buckingham Palace. With a small size and oddly shaped tail, our hero is sadly bullied. He's bullied at school, and he rashly chooses to run away. His journey to find answers to the questions he has occur right before Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Helped along the way by some memorable supporting mice and other creatures, our hero solves the mystery of who he really is. And I want to read a little excerpt. He actually meets Queen Victoria. High in the palace at the end of a dark and twisty corridor is Queen Victoria's bedchamber. You will never see this room because the public is not admitted. But I can tell you a bit about it, as it was on a certain June night. The bedchamber was nothing like as fine as the staterooms below or the picture gallery. Cobwebs clung to the corners. The hangings on the Queen's bed could use with a good shaking out, and her counterpane had bald patches. So did she, but Her Majesty was nowhere near bed yet. She sat at her writing desk in a rather tatty old dressing gown and 4 shawls. Her nightcap clung to the back of her head with streamers hanging down, and a cheery fire glowed in the grate. Her spectacles were on her nose, reflecting the flames. She had opened her diary and taken up a pen to write words the world would later read. How well I remember this day 60 years ago when I was called from my bed by dear Mamma to receive the news of my accession. That meant it was just past midnight now. The day of her Diamond Jubilee had come at last. Sighing, she set her pen aside and worked the worn wedding ring on her pudgy hand. A memory of her long-ago husband, Prince Albert, hung in the room like the cobwebs in the corners. She sighed again and scattered a little sand to dry the page. Then she reached for the cup of chamomile tea the serving maid had brought to her. Up went the cup in her pillowy hand, and there was I, who'd been peering around it, one hand drawn up to my front fur and my tail, questioning the saucer. She saw me. Her vision was dim even with spectacles, and her milky old eyes looked so loose in their sockets they seemed ready to drop out and roll around the writing desk. But she saw me. Her eyes followed the turning of my tail. "Ah," said the Queen of England, "we rather thought we weren't alone. Mice have died from less shock, but I drew myself up, as tall as I would go. I showed her my posture, then I bowed crisply from the neck, as you do." This is the companion. Sorry. Oh, good, you like that, Grace. Thank you. This is the companion to Secrets at Sea that Richard Peck wrote 2 years ago. And both books take place at the exact same time, just with different stories and different characters. Okay. And
Such a good writer.
yeah.
All right, so this is Prisoner 88, and this book was inspired by the author's vacation trip to the historic Idaho Territorial Penitentiary. And on her tour, she learned that the youngest prisoner who served time there was a 10-year-old boy named Jake Oliver Evans. He served time in 1887, and as soon as she heard this, she really felt like she really needed to learn more about this story. So this is a piece of historical fiction. It is based on the few known facts about Jake's life, with a great story to fill in the blanks. Jake was sentenced to 5 years in the penitentiary for manslaughter, although from the beginning of the novel, we aren't sure of the details surrounding the incident that brought him to the prison. Despite Jake's unusual placement, he settles into prison life quite quickly. He thinks that some of the aspects of life in prison are actually an improvement, like the fact that he gets 2 really great meals a day. However, there are some aspects that he doesn't like, including the fact that the warden has decided that he needs to learn to read, since he doesn't know how. Everybody at the prison works, and he begins working with a local pig farmer, Mr. Criswell, and develops a really strong connection with the family. He also develops really close connections with several inmates and the guards. But this story is not without its painful and violent moments. There are prison yard fights, attempted prison breaks, all of which keep the action in this story really moving along. Towards the end of the novel, he's finally able to read a letter from his father, in which he learns that his father has given up custody of him. And in the end, Jake finds a lot more family and comfort within the prison than he ever had outside. After almost a full year in prison, he is pardoned and sent to live with a foster family. I think the premise alone will grab the attention of many readers, but Jake's perseverance and triumph will keep them reading.
The next book is an extraordinary story about one extraordinary character in contemporary fiction. Who here's read Counting by Sevens? Lots of hands go up. This has gotten a lot of buzz throughout the year. When I book talk it to my students, immediately 15 kids put themselves on the waiting list for it. The scent is around Willow Chance, who's a 12-year-old genius who lives in Southern California. We meet Willow at the beginning of the story. She's being escorted home by Del Duke, her school counselor, who we'll learn more about shortly, and to a tragic scene. Her adoptive parents were in a car accident and have died. And Willow Chance, an extraordinarily brilliant, quirky kid, is now suddenly left without a family. This is a child who, we may have a child like her in our school, maybe not. She memorizes medical encyclopedias. She's already mastered many foreign languages. But she's one of those girls whose interior monologue is constantly on real. She's not one who's socially outgoing or has a lot of friends. Suddenly she's left without anything. So this is a story about how one girl weaves together a support network for herself by chance. The name Willow Chance rings in. Well, her connection with Del Duke has got to be the character you're going to love to hate and then love again. I love Del Duke because he is slimy, he's burnt out, he is totally terrible at what he does as a school counselor. You do not want your children to be around this guy. He has figured out a system of labeling kids. So any kid that comes into his office, he labels. He broke it down. You're either a misfit, an oddball, a lone wolf, or a weirdo. And he color codes their records. And then the day that Willow Chance walks into his office, his system goes out the window, he can't find a label for Willow, and thus the story moves forward. And it's going to be a book like Wonder, that once readers read it, she's not like Augie, but it changes your perspective on everything, and kids want to talk about it.
So this is Purge Has No Color by Tanya Lee Stone. And in the beginning of this book, there's a quote by historian Stephen Ambrose. He's referring to the U.S. forces during World War II. And he says, "Soldiers were fighting the world's worst racist, Adolf Hitler, in the world's most segregated army." And that statement really resonated with me as I read this book. So in this story, or piece of nonfiction, that Courage Has No Color, we learn about the story of the Triple Nickels, who were an all-black paratrooper unit developed by First Sergeant Walter Morris during World War II. The first members of the Triple Nickels were soldiers stationed as guards at the Fort Benning Parachute School. And Morris noticed a real lack of pride and engagement in his soldiers because they were just guards. They weren't really proud of what they were doing. They didn't feel like they had that much purpose. So he decided, against all rules and regulations, he decided to start running them through the same training that the white paratroopers went through. And they would just go after hours onto the equipment and do all the training exercises. And soon after, Morris was given commands to go to officially create the first all-black paratrooper unit. He was sent to see the big guy in charge and thought he was going to be in trouble, and instead he was given orders to kind of officially train these men. And while this seemed like a huge success, the racial prejudice and segregation was still just totally deeply ingrained in the culture of the Army and throughout all of the United States. And in this book, we really learn about the unrelenting devotion of the members of the Triple Nickels to serve their country, despite being time and time again them not being given the opportunity to go to battle. At one point, there's a big surge of troops that was needed, and they thought for sure they were going overseas to serve their country, and instead they were sent to fight forest fires in Oregon. And we also learn about the larger story of discrimination throughout the United States during this time. This was a really engaging piece of nonfiction. There are great images, and I was really drawn in from the beginning and rooting for these guys through the end.
The next book we have is Tara Sullivan's Golden Boy. Again, a book for probably 7th and up. It's the story of 13-year-old Habo who lives in Tanzania, and they call him a 00 because he has light eyes, yellow hair, and white skin because he is an albino. And what I didn't know before I read this book is that in Tanzania and other countries in Africa, albinos are hunted for their healing powers, and they make medicine and try and, anyway. So in this story, anyway, that's another story for another day. But, so poor Habo's having a really hard time. His brothers and his mom don't really want anything to do with him. The only person who cares about him is his sister. And because the father left, basically because of Habo, they have no money to pay their rent, so they have to leave their village and they head across the country to the city of, it's another town, it's still not very big, to Mwanza. And when they walk in the door, this is when they find out the truth about what happens to albinos, and the aunt says, "Why have you brought a 00 here?" And they have no idea. They think that she just doesn't want an albino in her house because it's going to put them all in danger. So once Habo realizes that he's put his family in grave danger, he decides to take matters into his own hand because they've, on their travels, they met a poacher who is now hunting him, and they want us to sell him for his body parts, essentially. So Habo takes off. He takes a 40-hour train ride across the country to Dar es Salaam because apparently there they don't hunt albinos. So it's about him, taking responsibility, finding his way, and helping out his family. And this is her first novel, and she read about the albino situation, and ended up traveling to Tanzania to finalize research on her novel, and is now a big advocate for trying to help with this problem, obviously.
And up next is The President Has Been Shot by James L. Swanson. And this gives an account of November 22nd, 1963, which was the day that President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. It gives a moment-by-moment account of the assassination, but it also gives an overview of some of the issues Kennedy faced during his administration, like the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, and the space race. It also touches upon his family life, how the Kennedys were viewed as royalty and America's fascination with them. There's really great photographs throughout the book. Makes it a really interesting and accessible read, and even though it's a book about a devastating event, it reads like a thriller, and kids won't want to put it down. They may be inspired to do further research. It made me want to read more about President Kennedy. Like I said, there's great photographs. There's even a series of photographs that show second by second the actual assassination. There's also some information on Lee Harvey Oswald and the manhunt for him after the assassination. Great source notes and back matter at the end. It may generate discussions between families, and kids may want to interview family members who lived at this point. And yeah, it's a really detailed, accessible account of part of American history. I have the next one, too. This is One Came Home by Amy Timberlake. A sister lost, a body found, the truth buried. It's 1871, and Georgie is a 13-year-old girl who lives in Placid, Wisconsin. Her older sister Agatha has disappeared. And then the town sheriff comes back into town with an unidentifiable young woman's body. And everybody in town just assumes that it's Agatha's body. Everybody but Georgie. Georgie refuses to believe that it's her sister, and she decides to travel out to Dog Hollow, where the body was found, to discover the truth and hopefully bring her sister back. When Billy, Agatha's one-time suitor, learns that Georgie is going to Dog Hollow, he insists on joining her, and the two embark on a dangerous, exciting journey. Georgie has a close encounter with a cougar. They discover 2 counterfeiters, and they're even involved in a shootout. It's a mix of mystery, adventure, and historical fiction. Georgie is a spunky, lovable, funny, sharp-shooting tomboy who can't help but root for.
The next novel is a middle grade novel by Linda Urban, The Center of Everything. This is Linda's 3rd middle grade novel, and in my opinion, her best so far. It centers around Ruby Pepperdine, and it really takes place in the course of one day, on Bunning Day in Bunning, New Hampshire, where they're celebrating the donut in New Hampshire. And the reason why was Cornelius Bunning, who was the town elder from years and years ago, discovered the donut. So every year they have a big parade, and there is an essay girl or boy picked to read an essay. And today it's Ruby's turn. This year it's Ruby's turn. She's the bunny girl, donut girl, essay girl, and she has to stand at the end of the parade and read her essay. She's got a lot of things spinning inside her mind. And what I love about Linda Urban's writing is that she totally values the kind of conflicts and dilemmas that children face that as adults we might think are trivial. And for Ruby Pepperdine, she's really struggling because the center of her world was her grandmother Gigi. And they would go to the top of their automotive business and gaze up at the stars every night. And her grandmother died. And right before her grandmother died, she wanted to tell Ruby something, and she just didn't get the chance. And so Ruby's really struggling with finding closure to her relationship with her mother, and what did her mother really mean to tell her. This is a fabulous small town story. If you know Linda, she lives in East Montpelier. And I have a feeling she's gone to the Montpelier 4th of July parade before. And I don't know if you have, but I have. And reading this book was like a trip down State Street on the 4th of July in Montpelier. A lot of the same imagery, a lot of the same scenes. In fact, the donut store is called Delish, and there's a candy store in downtown Montpelier called Delish. So she populates it with characters that your students will recognize. Her best friend, I love Linda's language. Her best friend, Ruby Pepperdine's best friend, is Nero De Niro, and they're the folks who run the donut shop. So will Ruby be able to read her essay? Will she find closure? And this little gem just sings.
Frogged by Vivian van der Velde. This is a fractured fairy tale. You can probably guess which one. So Princess Imogene is a girl that doesn't fit the traditional image of a princess. She is neither beautiful nor good, and she's about to turn 13, so her mother thinks it's about time that something is done about this. So she gives to her a book that's called The Art of Being a Princess, and she is supposed to read one chapter at a time and then discuss it with her mother. Well, needless to say, this is not her idea of a good time. She tries to read it, she gets bored. She goes down to the pond on their land, and there is a talking frog. It tends to happen with princesses. And he convinces her that he is a prince who has been enchanted and has become a frog, and everybody knows what you need to do to make him back into a prince. So yes, she does kiss this frog, and yes, he does turn into a person, but he's no prince. He's a boy that lives in the town, and the big surprise is that when she kisses him, she turns into a frog. And it turns out that the only way that she can stop being a frog is by kissing somebody else. So she has this moral dilemma. I mean, she doesn't want to be a frog, But is she going to do this to her mother, to a friend, to somebody in the palace? Well, for a while, she doesn't even have the option because she's captured by this traveling acting troupe. And first they capture her for ransom, because she is a princess after a while. And then they realize they can make a lot more money with her acting as a talking frog. So it's very funny. Each chapter of the book has the title of a chapter in their fictional book, Art of Being a Princess. And it's very inventive. The language is fun, and she has a really good solution at the end.
So Paperboy by Vince Vaughter, which won the a Newbery Honor Award in January, kind of by surprise. It was a dark horse. People weren't expecting this one. So this story, imagine 1959, you're in Memphis, Tennessee. You're an 11-year-old boy with a father who's a journalist, runs a downtown newspaper. Mom's kind of busy, a socialite. You have an African-American housekeeper. Everything's pretty normal. You're in a white neighborhood. You have a best friend who's going away for the summer, and you have to take over his paper route. And what people know about you so far is that you throw a really mean fastball, and you ride your bike, and you're a good kid. And so this is our character right here. He's about to deliver the paper, except he has a struggle that we don't see from the outside, but on the inside, it's a struggle that has defined his life, and that is that he has a very debilitating stutter. And for him, just imagine the hardest thing, and to go through life and not be able to express what's in your heart, not even to be able to say his own name. In fact, we don't know his name because it's the consonants that are so hard for him to actually speak that we don't even know his name. And so it's a coming-of-age story about how he's going to operate and maneuver in the world and do the paper job. He's got a paper out. How's he going to collect the money? The characters that he meets in 1959, Memphis, Tennessee, by delivering the paper, ultimately change his view on the world. And he meets one special man who really becomes a mentor for him and was kind of on the cutting edge of treatment therapies for stuttering. Because back in 1959, there really was nothing for people who suffered from this. Vince Vaughter, the author, this was his first novel, and it actually is a memoir. He just retired from a career in the newspaper world, and this is his story. This is his memoir, so it just is so authentic, and he's gotten just lots of resources in the back for stuttering, and just a fabulous story to, I think students will be very moved by his struggles, and will connect with him whether or not they have, obviously they probably acknowledge to have stutters, but they have their own challenges that aren't always apparent when we look at someone. Fabulous. And I'm so thrilled to be able to end the list with this book, because this is certainly a last but not least novel. Okay, Caveat, it's my favorite one on the list. PSB 11 is the follow-up novel to One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia. That was on the list a few years ago. Here we have the three Gaither sisters. It's going to be a trilogy, by the way. She's got a third one coming for my fans out there. I'm a huge fan of this novel. So the girls three Gaither girls have gone, in the first novel, they had gone to Oakland to visit their mother. Big Ma is their caretaker, and they live with their father as well, with Big Ma. But they've gone out to Oakland in the first book to be with their mom. Back in the Black Panther era, their mom's a poet. But not really a traditional mom. She loves them, but she's very absent and very focused on her intellectual work. So they are sent back to New York City. This is where this picks up. So early 1970s, the three sisters are back under the tutelage of Big Ma, who's so afraid that these girls are going to throw another big Negro spectacle right in front of her. She says that all the time. These girls are trying to keep these ebullient girls under wraps. But they cannot be repressed because, wouldn't you know it, the Jackson 5 are going to be coming to Madison Square Garden. And boy, don't they want tickets to go to that show. So they sneak down and they're watching the Jackson 5 on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they're biting their fists because they don't want Big Ma to hear them. Because if she hears the TV on, she's going to come down and turn it off. And Delphine, who's the oldest and the narrator, she is head over heels about Jermaine because he's the tall one, and she's the tall one too. And so the girls, they start collecting money to save to go to this concert. And that's just one piece of this miraculous novel. Their fathers developed a new relationship with a woman, so they have to navigate that and figure out who this new woman is. Delphine has an amazing teacher who's so inspiring and is shining a light on the world, so she's seeing the world in a new way. And then she has an uncle who's back from the Vietnam War, and just kind of coming to grips with who this person is now. And as adults, all those layers are so complex to us, but this novel for our students who weren't alive at that period of time, they'll find that that voice of Delphine is one that just goes right to your heart, and you want to root for her. And I love watching YouTube clips of the Jackson 5. I mean, that's the biggest thrill about reading this book. So be on the lookout for the third one. PSB 11, and that's the way where the title comes from is because Delphine now writes letters to her mother back in Oakland. And like any other 12-year-old girl, she just wants to grow up so bad, and she wants to do things so quickly. And her mother ends her letter saying, P.S. just be 11, just wait. When you're 14, that's going to be perfect. When you're a little bit older, just P.S. be 11. It's a perfect message.
And that's the list. If you've got any questions, we've got a couple minutes.
I'll just do a commercial about, did you all pick up materials? I don't know if are there still bookmarks back there? Because I have more here. Okay. And the PowerPoint of the books and a Prezi will both be on our website, and of course you're welcome to use those with your kids. And there will be something like 16 out of the 30 books that will be out in paperback by September, and so we will have book discussion sets of all of those. So go and spread the word. Do good work.
I also wanted to say something about this book. It is not a dark, depressing story. It has a dark, depressing event in it, but it is actually really great, funny voice, quirky girl navigating teenage life. So don't be afraid to give this to kids. Once they, right? Once
The
they,
event is off stage 10 years before the book was written.
right. And she's trying to find her mother and wants to have answers to her mother, but it is not done in a horrifying way, even though it's a horrifying subject.
I have a question about that book, because I have a seventh grader who's read it and she loved it, and his mother read it and loved it too, but do you feel you have to know a little bit about The Mockingbird, and are those references?
She writes, a lot of her letters are to Atticus Finch. It definitely would help if they understood that, who Atticus Finch was, because he is like the father figure to her. Her father is really still coping with this incident. He drinks too much. He's very not present for her. So she wants her dad to be Atticus Finch. So if you don't know Atticus Finch, it's not going to be quite as meaningful. But I think it's more that she's just writing to this character that's giving her hope. So I don't think so.
Okay. When I book talk that, I mentioned who the character is, and most students, most 7th and 8th graders get the reference. I'm not sure about 5th and 6th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It would enhance, but it's not required.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Thanks.
I think we could get